Hello everybody, Marcus Godwin here with the Shum Vremeni Noise of Time blog. Opening up on Telegram this time. So, a couple of weeks ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin made a very important statement, actually, not for the first time, but it kind of clarified Russian position on something very important. And Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov even said that they're going to change some legal status and some legal documents concerning the phrase unfriendly countries. So Vladimir Putin said this: in the world we don't have any unfriendly countries. We only have unfriendly ruling elites in some countries. Now obviously it doesn't take a genius to work out that he's referring here to the collective West. United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom now, which is no longer in the EU, and of course the European Union. These are the countries where, one way or another, they are constantly talking about the threat to the West from Russia. And who is talking about this? Their ruling elites. And this is the only reason why any conflict between Russia and the West exists and has ever existed for at least the last 1,000 years, actually. Russia has constantly been, over the last 1,000 years, attacked and subverted by Western ruling elites. And Russia itself poses absolutely zero threat to the West now, and never did. So the question is, of course, why is this happening? Even if, for example, in my own, for the time being, country, Great Britain, many people believe the propaganda and so on and so forth, which has always been there, anti-Russian. Of course, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager and so on, we were told that it was all anti-Soviet and anti-communist. This was the problem. But actually, I remember very, very clearly, because I was already a deep Russia watcher and had already visited the Soviet Union, in fact, several times. I remember very clearly that as soon as the Soviet Union, so-called, collapsed, it was actually a controlled demolition by the very people who put it up in the first place 70 years earlier. But as soon as that happened, the anti-Russia propaganda ramped up, not down. That is absolutely 100% clear, and anyone can go back to the kind of reports in those days. We used to have plenty of reports on British television about life in the Soviet Union, about dissidents in the Soviet Union, about food shortages in the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union was a country with full employment, where bread cost a penny a loaf, where had a fantastic transport system and a metro system that put the London Underground to shame, which is true, by the way, today and was back then. Etc., etc., etc. So, yeah, Russia doesn't have unfriendly countries. Most people in Great Britain, Germany, United States, even Canada or Australia would be actually quite interested in Russia. It was always quite popular as a country. It had some mystery, partly because of its history, partly because in the Soviet epoch it was relatively difficult to get there. Not so much in the later years, but certainly in the first half of the Soviet period. And so yeah, Russia has no intention and never has invaded the West, ever. And if you look now at the demographics as well, the population of Russia is just under 150 million. The population of the EU is 550 million off the top of my head, if I'm not mistaken here. So how exactly is that supposed to work out? How could a Russian army take over the whole of Europe and subdue and control all of those people? I mean, it's just not going to happen. And when Russia came west, it was only after Russia had been attacked, and Russia came as a liberating force. In our modern history, Russia liberated Europe from the Third Reich, from the white supremacist Nazi enslavers, which is what they were. One can get into all sorts of articles about arguments about the real reasons for fascism, some of Hitler's ideas about the banking system and so on, which were not so bad. Yeah, all of that's true. Make no mistake, Nazi Germany was a white supremacist enslavement entity, and that's all they ever had in mind for Slavonic peoples of the Russian Empire, as it was, the Soviet Union as it was called at the time. Russia also liberated Europe from Napoleon and the constant wars, and also French white supremacism, etc., etc., etc. If Napoleon had conquered Russia, there would be no Christianity today, actually, because Russia stands as the centre of world Christianity. Russians occupied Paris, lived there for 3 years. Then they made their biggest mistake and they left. Imagine if they hadn't left. In those days they could actually have probably stayed there. France would now be, and of course all the European lands in between France and Russia, may be parts of the Russian Empire. And everything that happened in the 20th century wouldn't have happened. Of course, Great Britain, whose elites, and only the elites, have been Russia's strongest enemy, probably for the last 400 years, certainly for the last 300. And these elites have caused unfathomable damage and destruction and death to peoples of the Russian Empire. Their most successful campaign was in 1917. I will be getting into more details about this in future programs, but for now I just want to say, for any of you who are believing this Western propaganda, Russia poses zero threat. I mean zero threat to the West in any way, but in some ways it can be said that yes, the very existence of Russia does pose a threat to these Western ruling elites. Why? Well, because they have been trying for at least 400 years. As I say, in my opinion, if you go back really, it's 1,000 years with the Teutons and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, etc. in the 16th century, to destroy Russia, and they have always failed. The closest they ever came actually was not in 1941, it was in 1917. This was the very closest they ever got to destroying Russia, but it still didn't work. Russia is back, and Russia is back as a religious country, embodying Christian values and also real Islamic values, not the kind of jihadi values that they talk about as being Islam in Western countries and the Western media and so on and so forth. And the problem is, you see, it's come to my inescapable conclusion that the real nub of this matter is not even the incredible amount of natural resources which are contained here in Russia, which of course the West would love to be able to control. They want to control everything. They hate anything. They want it, my precious. They want it. They really do want it. But the main reason for this is religion. The Western ruling elites, even hundreds of years ago, where they claimed to be post-schism Roman Catholic or some form of Protestant or Church of England, for example, actually that's not their religion. They have another very different religion which they keep secret from the populations and about which they are fanatically devoted. I wish I'd saved it now. I saw a post of somebody on Facebook a year or so ago who was saying, I never took religion seriously, it was never part of my life, but I started investigating why all this sort of thing is happening in the world, which is exactly what happened to me. I've been doing that since 2014 or the end of 2013. And he said, I came to the conclusion that our Western elites are absolutely obsessed, completely obsessed by religion, ancient bloodlines, etc., etc. They want to further theirs and destroy those that they consider to be on the other side. I'm sure by now you can guess what religion I'm talking about. And let's be blunt here. We are talking about the British royal family, the royal families who have been allowed to remain in Western Europe, who are soon going to get thrown under the bus, by the way, by the real people at the top of the pyramid. And so I claim, and most of all the politicians, especially those who've been put into place now all around Europe and so on, Starmer, Blair was the first one to get really back here, Macron, Merz, they're all of a religious belief which is the 100% polar opposite of Christianity. And for them, death and destruction is beautiful. The people dying now in Ukraine, the people who have died since they sabotaged the agreement which could have been in April 2022, those people who have died now, 1 million almost, primarily Ukrainians and of course Russians too. By the way, I have to say that if you're watching this from the West and you're seeing Western propaganda about how many casualties the Russians have suffered, this is complete nonsense. The Russians have suffered about 8 to 9 times less than Ukrainian soldiers have. However, let's stay on track. All those people who've died, for example, are sacrifices to their God. And they did it deliberately. They did it quite on purpose. Now, you in those countries, in Great Britain, you're about 66 million, I think, now. And these people are literally several thousand. And yet they're controlling you. Think about this, please. Same goes for France. 66, 67 million people controlled by several thousand Luciferians. Well, please think about this. So Marcus Godwin signing off. I'm going to try to do something most days on this new Telegram channel, Marcus Godwin, Shum Vremeni, Noise of Time channel, signing off from the Yusupovsky Garden in St. Petersburg. See you all very soon.